And what I've seen ATF doing in these prosecutions is extremely concerning. The threats that are posed by ATF's overreach are not theoretical, they're very real. And they're not limited to arm braces or the zero tolerance rule either.
At the House Oversight Subcommittee and House Judiciary Subcommittee joint hearing on Thursday, Zermay-Larosiere, who is an attorney and partner that has worked as a legal practitioner in the area of firearms law. He has represented federal firearm licensees who have had their licenses revoked by the ATF and has written extensively on the Second Amendment in firearms law. Larosiere gave vivid actual examples of the ATF's assault on Americans' Second Amendment rights, detailing examples of the ATF historically criminalizing law-abiding Americans, including those who have served their country fighting for the Constitution. Here is his powerful 5-minute testimony.
I'm an attorney working in the Second Amendment space. I'm a child of immigrants, and I guess in following their lead, I decided to do a job that most Americans didn't want to, and that's protecting fundamental rights. I've been studying the law and policy of arms for over a decade, but I think most important for this hearing is my experience representing individuals and small businesses who have been caught up in some of the flip-floppery that ATF has engaged in. Representing individuals and small businesses that have had their lives shattered, their employees left jobless because of, frankly, innocent omissions that were characterized as intentional misconduct by the ATF. These individuals, oftentimes in the firearms industry, are employers with less than 15 employees. That's the majority of the industry here. And I've represented these people for nominal or no fee, frankly, because I feel it's the right thing to do. And what I've seen ATF doing in these prosecutions is extremely concerning. The threats that are posed by ATF's overreach are not theoretical, they're very real. And they're not limited to arm braces or the zero tolerance rule either. I'd like to tell you guys about Patrick Tate Adamiak. He was a 28-year-old Navy sailor, and he was recently convicted for dealing in machine guns. Now, looking at that headline might not cause you to take a second thought, but when you scratch a little deeper, the machine guns Tate was convicted of dealing in were actually boxes of cut-up, inoperable parts that the ATF had approved the importation and sale of as unregulated parts kits years ago. And then in an unpromulgated, unpublicized change of opinion, ATF decided that that amount of cut-up was not quite cut up enough. They'd secured a conviction, and again, 28-year-old Tate, who dealt in parts that were purchased in open commerce with a credit card, is now awaiting sentencing, and his plans of marriage are indefinitely on hold. I'd like to tell you about Matthew Raymond Hoover, who's a political commentator who is accused of advertising metal cards with a drawing of an alleged machine gun part on it. A drawing. ATF took the incredibly aggressive position and vindictively is prosecuted Mr. Hoover, suggesting that this drawing is actually a combination of parts. He is facing over 60 years in prison, a cancer-stricken man with not an ill-willed bone in his body, and several young children. I think it's important when we think about the pistol brace problem to look at what law we're dealing with. We're talking about interpretations of the National Firearms Act. This is an act that in its original drafts sought to regulate handguns. And this is why it sheds some light as to just how absurd the pistol brace problem is. Short-barreled rifles were added to the act to correct an obvious loophole to a handgun restriction. For it was raised in the hearings that if pistols were regulated, but you could simply cut down a rifle, well, that would be the effective equivalent of a pistol. Later on, to secure passage, the reference to pistols and revolvers were slipshottedly removed, but the vestigial remains of a pistol regulation, the barrel length restrictions, were there, leaving the rules that we're now dealing with, the law that we're now dealing with interpretations of, as kind of like a cancer-prone vestigial organ. It doesn't accomplish anything useful, but as many Americans and some of my clients have found out, it sure can get you into trouble. The argument that these guns, under a law that was designed to designed to regulate concealable firearms, become more dangerous when you make them less concealable by adding a component to the end is so obviously and intensely contrived, it's kind of absurd. Insofar as zero tolerance goes, the GCA, the Gun Control Act, has made federal firearms licensees the gatekeepers to access to the Second Amendment right for most Americans. What we're seeing now is a two-pointed prong where ATF is revoking licenses for little to no reason. I've seen it as simple. The violations they were alleged were as simple as a customer had filled out black as their race, but not picked Hispanic or Latino. That didn't strike me as terribly nefarious. I think that ATF has a moral obligation to really look at how it is enforcing these laws.
Subscribe to our channel because we the people are endowed by our Creator with these unalienable rights: life, liberty, and guns.